is up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel, Serendipity. Today I'm going to be reacting to why are there no bridges in East London? I mean, I am on a London kick right now. Learned a lot about London that I didn't know already. And like this is going to be another one I learned. I didn't know that there was no bridges on East London. But I would have to think, and if I could think about like what happens here is it's obviously between a river, and for whatever reason they haven't built bridges. I don't know. For like here, if you're going from, so you have like East Baton Rouge Parish and West Baton Rouge Parish, and you got the Mississippi River that divides them, and you only really have 4 ways without going really out your way. I mean, you really only have 2 ways of getting across the Mississippi River without going completely out your way. Actually, if I can pull it up right here. So yeah, that was lightning. I mean thunder. So basically, so you got, man, it's still rumbling. So you have East Baton Rouge, and then you have West Baton Rouge, and then you have the interstate that goes over the Mississippi River. Then you have Highway 190 that goes over the Mississippi River. And really, that's really it if you're just trying to travel and go. And the only other ways is if you go up north to St. Francisville, oh, pass it up. St. Francisville, you have this little highway right here. And then if you go, let's see, Plaquemine, you have, where's the ferry? There's a ferry in Plaquemine. I'm not sure where. Okay, it's right there. Yeah, so you have the Plaquemine Sunshine Ferry. And then the only other one, but it's still out of your way, you have to go all the way to Donaldsonville, which is called the Sunshine Bridge, and which is right there. And from Plaquemine to Donaldsonville, it's like an hour long, and then Plaquemine to St. Francisville, it's about an hour and a half long. So yeah, there's not really, it's so aggravating because I work in Baton Rouge, and it's such an annoying thing because of how much traffic is trying to not only leave the city, but you're taking the interstate, and that's the only real way without going crazy out of your way to get from one side of the state to the other. And that's the only real way to get there. I mean, you could come down from New Orleans and then the interstate goes like that. I don't think yeah. So if you're traveling, I mean, you'd be going out your way, but you could go through New Orleans, then you go straight up to Baton Rouge, and then you go left. But this is really the only way to get from this side of the state to this side of the state. So yeah. So that's what basically I'm just saying I feel the East London, and I feel your pain. That's what I'm just trying to say. But yeah, let's see why there are no bridges in East London.
You're spoiled for choice for ways to cross the River Thames.
But in East London, the Thames is your wet nemesis. Your only options to cross are queue for ages for the Blackwall Tunnel, go the huge long way round and pay the toll for the Dartford crossing, or get seasick on the so slow it's literally never worth it Woolwich ferry. This gives poor East London quite the disadvantage.
Despite the very short distance as the crow flies, if you live here, it's very unlikely you go to work or school or do your shopping or visit friends here, unless you're a crow.
Greater London effectively operates like a Pac-Man with a wacka wide gap between these isolated communities.
So how did London end up so unfairly asymmetrical? In other words, why is West London better than East London? Dun 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 dun. Basically, there are 3 reasons why it's easier to build bridges in West London than East London.
1. Geography. In the west, the River Thames is a narrow, squiggly trickle where bridge building is easy. But by the time it gets to London Bridge, it becomes a wide, majestic estuary with massive tides and marshy floodplains. Lest we forget, the Romans built London Bridge where they did, specifically because it was the widest place they could build it. 2. Shipping. In the late 19th century, when London did most of its growing, it was the biggest shipping port in the world, making bridge building east of the ports practically impossible.
The literally only bridge in East-ish London, Tower Bridge, was an incredible feat of construction. So impressive it merited its own episode. Its elaborate brute force engineering and massive costs were justified by its iconic location, a huge gateway to the heart of London for those arriving by boat.
If they wanted to build any more bridges in East London, every one of them would have to be bigger or more complicated than Tower Bridge. And that wasn't going to happen because 3. No demand.
Historically, East London has always been poorer and more sparsely populated than West London, with no rich people to pay tolls and no important people to complain. So not only was it more effort to build
crossings
here, it wasn't worth the effort. However, that all started to change at the end of the 19th century.
In the decades since the disastrous Thames Tunnel, the Victorians had learnt some lessons and had become rather good at digging.
Having figured out how to build miles of railways underground, all they had to do was exactly the same thing under the river.
So at the end of the 19th century, using the same technology as the Tube, London got its very first road tunnels, one at Blackwall and one at Rotherhithe.
With demand still rising and East London's population still growing, these should have been the start of a tunnel revolution spreading eastwards along the Thames throughout the 20th century. So why didn't that happen? It's a story that's been told so many times I'm getting bored of it now. Basically, the war.
First the First World War and second the Second World War put a stop to all big public projects. And when the wars were over, the money had run out, and it never really came back.
And so, the 20th century saw pretty much no new river crossings in London.
Apart from the Greenwich and Woolwich foot tunnels, which don't really count because they're just foot tunnels, Chiswick and Twickenham bridges, both part of the same road, opened on the same day in 1933, a second Blackwall tunnel, which doesn't really count because it's just a widening of the first, and the Dartford tunnel, which became 2 Dartford tunnels, which became 2 Dartford tunnels, and the 𝐂𝐤𝐤 bridge, which also doesn't really count because it's in not London. London found itself frozen in this asymmetrical state for more than a century.
This asymmetry gives the river a completely different character depending which side of London you're on.
In the west, the river brings prosperity and flats with views and gastropubs and university boat races. But in the east, the river brings...
Wow, that's a big difference.
By the end of the 20th century, the shipping industry that prevented any crossings being built here in the first place had all but disappeared, leaving behind a string of post-industrial literal dead ends, largely untouched by regeneration or your thoughts.
The exception that proves the rule is Canary Wharf, which since the 80s has seen a rebirth as a business district full of
Has no one ever thought to try to do anything to fix this? Yes, they have, ages ago.
In the 1970s, plans were afoot for a long-awaited pill to close Pac-Man's mouth, the boringly named the East London River Crossing.
By this time, technology had moved on, and bridges had once again overtaken tunnels as the more cost-effective way to get cars across a river.
The bridge formed part of the notorious plans for new motorways in London called ringways.
On the north side, the roads were more than ready for the arrival of the new bridge.
You can clearly see on satellite view how the North Circular Road gapes expectantly open wide, ready to send and receive cross-river traffic. But on the south side, it's not clear at all where the traffic was meant to go. The new bridge would have necessitated the construction of a huge 8-lane motorway, bulldozing hundreds of households out of the way.
The people of Plumstead were understandably unhappy when the bridge got approval in 1985, but their bacon was rescued by an unlikely saviour.
2 years later, in 1987, the government accidentally built an international airport right next door to the site of the new bridge, which added a maximum height restriction on top of the already restrictive minimum height restriction.
With the bridge needing a complete redesign, that meant going through the approval process all over again. And this time, it failed, and all thoughts of a crossing here were abandoned in 1993. But not for long.
In 2004, the Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, proposed an upgrade, or downgrade depending how you look at it, on the same site. The slightly betterly named Thames Gateway Bridge.
Ken's bridge was going to be a local bridge for local people.
There would be just 4 lanes instead of 8, 2 of which would be bus lanes, which had the potential of being turned into an extension for the DLR.
You can see on satellite view that Ken's bridge got quite far in the planning stages too.
Just north of Galleon's Reach, there's a wide concrete flyover that stops mid-air where the connection to his new bridge was going to be.
Environmentally speaking, it was a massive improvement on the monster from the 70s, but there was a major flaw in Ken's concept.
A local bridge for local people was a very naive and completely impossible thing to enforce.
I'm thinking this one, go away!
Ken's bridge could only have been local if it were one of many crossings in East London, so that travellers had lots of options, just like how it is in West London. But with East London so far behind, the Thames Gateway Bridge on its own would unavoidably have drawn cars and lorries from all over London, congesting and polluting the narrow residential streets of Plumstead, which in many ways is worse than building a motorway through it.
The Thames Gateway Bridge was indeed designed to be joined later by the Belvedere Bridge and Silvertown Tunnel, But the locals knew that these complementary crossings wouldn't realistically have come to the rescue for decades, if they ever came at all.
For that reason, the Thames Gateway Bridge was viewed as a cause of congestion. And for that reason, it had almost no support politically or locally. And for that reason, when the next Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, came along, he took the popular and simple decision to scrap it. It was a rather odd move for Boris, a man so famously fond of bridges. Perhaps he just didn't like it because it wasn't his idea.
It's harder than ever to get big projects like bridges funded by the government and/or approved by the locals. That's why all the bridges built this century have been quite a pedestrian affair. So far we've had the Millennium Bridge, which when first opened struggled to take the weight of pedestrians, and the Emirates Airline, an expensive over-branded cable car/tourist non-attraction connecting nowhere to nowhere else, inexplicably featured on the tube map despite a grand total of regular users of 4.
A few more pedestrian-only bridges have also been planned and not built.
At Canary Wharf, Wandsworth, Pimlico, and most high profile of all, the profoundly unnecessary Garden Bridge, intended more for private parties and selfies than for travel, which cost £53 million just to cancel.
Wow.
But these are tourist
that would've
attractions
been
at
nice.
best and vanity projects at worst. And they're all in central London. They do nothing to address the fundamental packmanity of Greater London and are quite insulting to East Londoners. So now, 15 years after the Thames Gateway Bridge was cancelled, what's been put on the table to address this? The worst crossing ever proposed.
Right next door to the Blackwall Tunnel, but at a jaunty angle, is the very controversially proposed Silvertown Tunnel.
It's a very odd choice of location, given that it's one of the few parts of East London that already has lots of river crossings, and it's an even odder choice of mode. The Silvertown Tunnel is for motor traffic only, with no pedestrians, cyclists or trains allowed. Its purpose is to reduce traffic in the Blackwall Tunnel, which we really should have learnt by now, in real life will encourage more car journeys than before and create more congestion in the whole Blackwall area.
Public opinion is more anti-car than ever, which is why there's a massive campaign against the Silvertown Tunnel. And as for whether it'll ever be built, I don't know.
It's a paradox. East London desperately needs connections, but East London desperately also needs not to be ruined by pollution and congestion.
No.
So what on earth could be the solution? There's actually a rather brilliant one.
The two as yet unconnected East Londons are a great opportunity to create ambitious new non-car crossings for rail, trams, cycling and walking.
Ignoring today's demand for new roads and instead providing for journeys that don't exist yet may seem daft and will certainly cause frustration for the first few years. But when the only option to cross is a clean, green, sustainable one, people will take the clean, green, sustainable one in their thousands, and the positive effect will spread well beyond the banks of this river. For proof of how brilliantly this phenomenon works, come with me now to West London.
In 2019, nasty cracks were found in the pedestals of Hammersmith Bridge, and the local council abruptly closed it to all traffic after 132 years of service.
Understandably, many local drivers complained, saying it would cause traffic jams, and it did at first, but then an interesting thing happened.
When Hammersmith Bridge reopened in 2021, it assumed a new role as a quiet, pleasant and safe pedestrian and cycle bridge, which has encouraged more journeys by foot and by bike, reducing car journeys and traffic not just in Hammersmith but across West London.
What Hammersmith shows us is that what we choose to build, or indeed choose to don't build, affects how we choose or don't choose to travel. And that's the way round it should be. The tide is shifting, pun massively intended, in the right direction, away from cars.
The proposed Lower Thames Crossing, a scheme to fight cars with cars to try to take traffic out of the Dartford Tunnel, has been roundly rejected by locals.
There's actually been rather a lot of progress for trains lately.
No fewer than 7 new rail crossings have appeared across the Thames in the last 25 years, and there are even more proposed for the future. There's a potential rail link to Thamesmead from the DLR or overground, but probably not both. There's the 𝐾NX tram, a planned tram network around the riverside commuter towns in Kent and Essex linked by a tunnel, which is too far outside London to be taken seriously. And of course the Elizabeth line is going to open, tomorrow. Well, it took 3 videos, but that's pretty much the whole history of the River Thames and how Londoners have crossed it from the Romans to the present day.
I find it fascinating how much London's relationship with its river has changed over its long history. It's actually quite sad to think that what started out as a major highway and the lifeblood of London, saturated with boats of all different shapes and sizes, now spends most of its time sitting uselessly empty. A physical and mental barrier between North and South London. But will this trend, like so many others in London's evolving infrastructure, shift back the other way? Are there ways we could put our river to better use?
The Thames Clippers are starting to transform from an expensive novelty tourist attraction into a reliable commuter service. Maybe they have a future as a no-nonsense integrated part of the city's transport network, like how it is in Sydney, or Brisbane, or Copenhagen, or San Francisco, or Zurich, or Hong Kong, or Amsterdam. Or maybe they'll go completely the other way and drain the River Thames and turn it into a park. It's not that far-fetched an idea. It's exactly what they did to the River Turia in Valencia in 1969, making the city safer from flooding and opening up acres of new green space.
Wow.
What future technologies lie ahead in the next 1,000 years that could see our river once again becoming a major useful highway? The answer is coming in part 4.
That's interesting because London, the reason, why London got that so big is because of the river. What happens if they get rid of the river, you know? I really like how Jay Foreman does his videos. You can really like digest it. Like, it's very, like, understand it a lot easier than probably someone else that was trying to explain it. What was really crazy is that they got really close to building a bridge there, but then they did an airport and the bridge couldn't meet the height restriction and the boat restriction. Something always came up why they couldn't build a bridge. At the last part of the video, what was interesting was them saying that to take away the river and make more areas for green space, which I think that would be so crazy. And I don't even know if that would happen. Would that, like, I don't even think that would be a good idea, huh? The reason why London is as big as it is now is because of the river. So it's kind of crazy to think that they would ever like get rid of it. But it does seem like a cool idea for like a bigger green space. Yeah. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like always, there's more to come, and I'll see you in the next one.